Right, welcome back to our set review for Super Slam. So, we're up to the Revered section of cards. So, of course, these cards are for Tough Nut and Pleiades being our Revered heroes. Now, I think the general focus of these cards is kind of a bit more defensive, right? Toughness generation is a big core element to Revered, apparently, along with, of course, the Crowd Cheers You being the staple mechanic of these heroes. So when you get cheered as Tough Nut, you get Toughness token, and as Pleiades, you get a Confidence token. So, starting off, we have some equipment, the Helm of the Adored, where this defends the Crowd Cheers You and Blade Break 1. So when you block with it, you get a cheer proc, which is definitely really nice, because there's a ton of cards that will synergize with that, especially on the defensive step. So it just being on-demand cheer is definitely a really nice mechanic, and might see some level of use, because it is still pretty decent value. You get the one block off of it, plus the token generation from either hero, and then the ability to trigger some of the other effects on certain other cards. So it'll definitely see some usage in Commoner, Project Blue, and maybe a little bit of niche usage in Constructed, right? Because again, it all depends on how much you're heavily relying on the Crowd Cheers You mechanic. Now, for the arms, we have Hold Firm. Action, pay 3, destroy this and create 3 toughness tokens. Activate this only if you have less life than each other hero. Go again and Blade Break 1. Now, the effect on this to me is actually kind of really nice. I think this might be my favorite out of them all. The 3 Minds is definitely cool too for Reviled once we get to it. But action pay 3 to create 3 toughness tokens is essentially allowing you to stockpile a card for that opponent's turn, right? You get to hopefully take a blue from your hand that might be worth 2 or 3 block, convert it into 3 toughness. So the ability to convert a card on your turn to, in a sense, be an extra card worth of stats on your opponent's turn is definitely really nice as well. Now, our first Majestic is Crowd Goes Wild. If you've been cheered this turn, this costs 3 less to play as a nice yellow 6. So, yeah, if you get your cheer off, this is a 0 for 6, which is definitely really nice, right? So as Tough Nut, definitely a little bit easier to achieve using his ability, but it still makes it a really nice body to then stack with some of those other effects like Auras of Suspense for Pleiades. So it is definitely a really nice Majestic. I mean, anytime you can swing big for free is definitely really good, right? Then we have No Hero Stand Alone as the other Majestic. 3 cost, while this is any zone, if you controlled a toughness token this turn, this gets +3 and ambush. Ambush meaning you can block with it from your arsenal, and then when this defends clash with the attacking hero, the winner may choose an attacking or defending card to get -3 power or -3 block, this chain link. So it is potentially 6 worth value, right? So if you've controlled a toughness, meaning that as long as you had it at the start of your opponent's turn, this has its own +3 and the ability to again block from arsenal. But then if you win the clash, you get an extra 3 on top of that, unless potentially your opponent's swinging something smaller, but then there's not really much point into using this unless it's sort of a double down situation where you're not too sure you'll win the clash. So it can definitely be a potentially high value arsenal blocking card, which is definitely really nice. And again, toughness definitely seems like a core mechanic for Revered in general as well. Now, for super rares, we have a Good Clean Fight, a 3 for 7. If this is attacking a hero, non-equipment cards they own lose and can't gain abilities, right? So any defense reaction that has some text doesn't have it anymore, be it opt or sync or anything like that. Not to mention that any of the new ambush cards as well, or any of the new block effects also would be turned off by a Good Clean Fight. So it is a nice attack with its own level of protection that can definitely come in handy to just present as a decent chunk of damage, or of course again to synergize with setup as someone like Pleiades. Next we have Escalate Order, a 2 for 6. When this attacks, if you control a toughness token, you get to create 3 more. So again, this is potentially a lot of value, right? If you get those 3 extra toughness, you're getting 3 extra block on a 2 for 6, which is definitely really nice. And again, toughness doesn't seem too difficult to get, right? As Tough Nut, it's part of your hero ability, and then as Pleiades, you do have access to enough cards to generate toughness. Now, speaking of payoffs for toughness, we have Old Favorite. When this attacks, if you've been cheered this turn, you get to create a toughness token, so it has some utility if you're just attacking with it. But when this defends, if it has 6 or more block, put it on the bottom of its owner's deck when the combat chain closes. So if you've managed to get this to 6 block, it then becomes a reusable card, a reusable blocking card, which is definitely really nice. Now, it does have to have 6 block when it defends. So for instance, toughness is definitely the key synergy here. But for instance, a card like Reinforce the Line, which is an instant, would not be able to proc its effects because you would have already defended with Old Favorite. Then after that, we have Renounce Violence as a nice blue, so it's pitchable, some aspect, it's an instant, so unfortunately no block, but destroy up to 3 might tokens and create a toughness token for each token destroyed this way. So if you're in the right matchup, this is essentially a pretty powerful switch around, right? So even if you trigger its ability once, destroy one might token and get one toughness token, that's essentially 2 value, which is on rate as a blue. But if you hit 2, 3, then you're starting to really get value out of this card, not to mention then also reducing your opponent's turn. So yeah, definitely really nice as a little bit of deck tech, a little bit of aura disruption into the right matchup. Now, never give up. Instant pay 2, put this on the bottom of your deck, target defending action card gets +3 this chain link, activate this only while it's in your graveyard, and you must have less life than each other hero and have been cheered this turn. So it by itself is a yellow 3 block, right? With the objective being you get it in your graveyard, you accomplish its effect, and then you get to recycle it as well. So it's reusable block, but it does have some hefty conditions. I think the conditions are pretty fair, right? Considering the amount of value you can get out of this. I always like to look at the situation being, again, if you have access to a blue, you're getting a resource out of this, you're getting its block value out of this, and you're getting to put a card back to your deck. So it is really, really solid. Now, going back to Old Favorite, again, because you're targeting a defending action card, you've already defended with the card, so I don't believe you're able to use Never Give Up to get a card like Old Favorite to its 6 block to trigger its ability, but there is definitely still a lot of value here with Never Give Up. Now, on to the rares. So we have Comeback Kid as a 3 for 7 in red, but it does come as yellow and blue as well. So again, as you go up in pitch, you're just reducing its power. Yellow for 6, blue for 5. When this attacks a hero, if you have less life than them, the crowd cheers you, and if you've been cheered this turn, this gets +1. So I really like these cards, right? They have a conditional cheer, but then also a secondary effect that is separate from that, right? So again, as Tough Nut, for instance, you have an easier time cheering, that you don't necessarily have to rely on the cheer from this card, but if you can double down on it, then that's even better. So it is definitely a nice filler attack for Revered and a possible extra cheer trigger on your turn. Then we have Disarm. So this is part of another 3 set of when this defends if it has 6 or more block, do X, which is definitely a really cool design. Now, they all have the same first clause of when this attacks. If you've been cheered this turn, create a toughness token. So they do have that usability if you know you wouldn't be able to get it to its 6 block. Now, for Disarm's effect, when this defends, again, if it has 6 or more block, the attacking hero puts a card from their hand on the bottom of their deck, which is definitely a nice amount of disruption, right? This is a really cool blocking card, but you have to get it to that 6 block, which is most likely, again, achieved through toughness generation. So you really want to be trying to hit 3 toughness for these stringer cards to really get that value out of them, because the value is definitely really nice, right? You get this to 6, and it's essentially a 9, right? Because you're getting 1 card out of your opponent's hand, making it a really nice defensive disruption card. Now, for Dismember, its effect when it has 6 or more block is the attacking hero puts an aura they control on the bottom of their deck. So again, some level of disruption, which we definitely need, right? We need more aura interactions, so they can definitely be used for it. And again, these cards can sort of be swapped out, right? If you're in a deck that, is not always going to get to 3 toughness, but will be able to get to 3 toughness every now and then, you can definitely pick and choose which ones to use, with the idea being that these are defensive cards, right? They are fallback, they're just a 3 block you can give your opponent. But again, with toughness, they become a little bit of disruption. Now, the last one is Disperse. Again, when this defends, if it has 6 or more block, the attacking hero puts a card from their arsenal on the bottom of the deck. So overall, they do all offer some good disruption, again, with the hurdle of getting it to 6 block. Next up, we have Shinning Courage. Up to 1 target defending action card gets +3 this turn, plus the crowd cheers you. So it is, in a way, a 4 value red, right? Instant, you get the token from the cheer, and you get 3 blocks. So it is definitely worthwhile. It has less of a downside than usual instant cards, right? Being that you do get some block out of it, and then you still get the cheer proc. So in a sense, it is still a 4 value card that plays around attack protection, right? Overpower, confidence, and dominate, because you can stack up that block. But you do have to target a defending action card, right? You can't double down on a block. You can't give extra defense to a defense reaction. You need to specifically target a defending action card, which again does make it nice utility in someone like Tough Nut. Go that little bit extra block, set up some toughness for your next turn, and also get rid of the instant in your hand to then again be able to use 6s. Now, Will of the Crowd. A nice blue 2 block, but when this defends, if you've been cheered this turn, defending action cards get +3 this chain link, right? And that is very interesting because, it would have been good enough if this itself went up to, for instance, 5 block, but no, it is a whole lot of block if you've been cheered. So, yeah, the ability for this to help, be a 2 card play where it's this plus maybe a 3 that becomes a 6, or even, more egregiously, you have 2 action cards blocking along with this, and you're just able to completely overblock a card. It's definitely really, really cool. So again, these are one of those cards that you want to be able to cheer on your opponent's turn. Now, dig in. When this defends, you may pay up to 3. Create that many toughness tokens coming in red, yellow, and blue. So the yellow is, of course, a yellow 6-power card, right? For our lovely Brute Tough Nut. But, right, I do find this card a little bit awkward. So the idea here is you defend with it, you pay up to 3, so you're giving 1 extra card along with it, to then create toughness tokens, right? Stockpiling block for your next turn afterwards. So it's only really nice, in my mind, right, in a turn where you don't have to block that much, right? You can empty your hand and then set up for that next turn afterwards to benefit from the toughness tokens. So while we do have, again, those really good if you have 6 block payoff cards, it's awkward in the sense that you don't know if they're coming, right? But nonetheless, being able to generate a stack of tokens to then, again, activate some of those other cards, just have them for a card that, again, checks if you control X token, is still pretty nice. Now, empowering Ruckus. If you've been cheered this turn, this gets +1, so kind of just a filler set of cards, right? We're in the comment section, but you know, it's still a nice stat line. So a 3, 4, potentially 7 if you've been cheered this turn. Then fight from behind, a 2 for 6 when this attacks or defends. If you have less life than each other hero, the crowd cheers you. So it's definitely a very flexible cheer trigger, but unfortunately a little held back by, of course, its 2 block value. But as either Pleiades or Tough Nut, it's still nice to get the token out of a card like this, right? It puts it to, I guess, fair value, but then you have, for instance, Pleiades setting up the contents for your next turn, or Tough Nut hitting a breakpoint between this and maybe another blocking card, and then shifting that extra +1 to the following turn, right? So yeah, there's definitely enough value to me in the crowd cheers you proc for this to be somewhat okay, being a 2-block card. Then Rapturous Applause. When you win a clash revealing this, the crowd cheers you. So a little bit of clash synergy, a little bit of cheer synergy, but I do find clash a little bit of a predicament, right? So as Pleiades, you want to take a whole bunch of setup stuff, which means you're not necessarily clashing. And then as Tough Nut, you can definitely win clashes against certain decks, but then you will run into other decks where you might not win a clash. So I can't necessarily say this is worth taking, or if the whole clash package altogether is worth taking, but with the card being in support of another mechanic like clash, it does mean if we get more clash support, then obviously this card will get better and better. And again, it is a potential cheer trigger, which is definitely really nice. Now, speaking of clash, we have Tough Smashup. When this defends clash with the attacking hero, the winner creates a toughness token. You may put your revealed card on the bottom of its owner's deck. So it's a 3 for 7 with a pseudo opt, right? So as Tough Nut, that's definitely really nice, being able to restructure your deck. And again, if you defend with it, you clash, and then the winner gets a toughness token. So, you know, it's not always great to potentially give your opponent something, but you can definitely build around these clash mechanics and their payoffs. And I think, the ordering when it comes to Tough Nut is definitely really, really nice, because you want to be able to line up, or at least know what card you will be pitching when you activate his ability. Now, it seems like we're getting a whole set of limited swing bigs, right? I think there's one in every single section, right? Brute have a new one, Guardian have their own, and then there's Revered, and I'm pretty sure there's one for Reviled. But when the combat chain closes, if this then hits, the defending hero creates a toughness token as a 2 for 7 with 2 blocks. So it's a little bit under the swing big stat line, but you know, it's still okay. It's limited. What can you expect? All right, cheers. A 0 blue with 3 blocks, so already ticking some boxes. Go again. When this enters or leaves the arena, the crowd cheers you. At the start of your turn, destroy this. Meaning you get a cheer when you play it, and you get a cheer when it leaves on your next turn. So the fact that it lines up cheers for 2 turns is definitely really cool, right? Again, it synergizes with some of those attacks that are looking for a cheer to proc their auxiliary effect. So in terms of pitching and blocking, right, it's still worth 3, and then its actual effect is still worth 2 over 2 turns, which is still definitely fair, right? Again, it all depends on how much we need to rely on these cheer effects. Again, as Tough Nut, you have an easy time triggering yourself, but as Pleiades, right, this helps set up confidence, and again, it helps synergizes with some of those other cards. Now, Heroic Grit, 0 cost. The next attack this turn gets +1 for each toughness token you control. Create a toughness token and go again. So, I obviously want to eventually play around with this card, right? Get enough toughness, and this is suddenly a really strong card. It is something that is scalable. You create enough toughness tokens, and you turn this into a nice big buff. And then it also has essentially the caveat of giving you a big turn that then leads into a big defensive turn. So that's definitely kind of cool, but I don't think we've seen anything crazy in terms of toughness generation. I think everything is pretty much fair value, right? So from a card, you can get a 3 out of it, right? And that still just ends up being a +3. But it is definitely something for me to put a pin in and look into, right? To see how egregious we could make it. Because boy, do I like things that can scale. Now, Heroic Pose. Next attack this turn gets +3. The crowd cheers you and go again. So overall, my opinion of these types of cards are just, if we need the cheer effects, right? If that's a real big core mechanic of the deck we're trying to build, then, you know, it's good enough, right? It's a alright buff that gets you the cheer trigger for X card, and then also, as the Revered Heroes, generates a token. So, yeah, fair all around. Now, Humbled Entrance. A 0 blue, right, 2 block, create 3 toughness tokens, go again. So, essentially, you draw it, it's not worth its block value, but then you play it, and then the next turn, you have that stockpile of toughness, right, that extra card worth of block for it. So, turn delayed 3 block is a interesting thought. I think it'd almost be a no-brainer if it was 3 block itself, right? Because then you have the flexibility to block with it, turn draw it. You don't have to block with it. You can either pitch it or play it and get that value. So I suppose the question is whether or not, again, there's enough of those other cards where you want the 3 toughness, right? For instance, again, the ones that want to get to 6 block, anything that checks what tokens you have, or maybe even the new card that scales damage with toughness. But it's probably one of the stronger commons in my eyes, right? Just because, again, the potential synergy. And lastly, Darling of the Crowd. While this is defending, if you've been cheered this turn, this gets +1. So, on rate block, right? That again allows it to be above rate block. So, yeah, really, really nice. We're seeing, again, a whole bunch of block cards in a Super Slam. So they're really pushing them as the new defense element. Probably see some reduction in defense reactions going forward, which is definitely, you know, somewhat warranted. It's just whether or not you can get around the added flexibility of defense reactions or even ambush being playable, right, from the arsenal. But still, right, a nice, good on-rate block with potential to be a little bit higher, right? Definitely, again, another nice, solid comment. So, yeah, overall, even the stuff designed for limited, I think because there's no, you know, X mechanic, like, for instance, we had Treasure Island for High Seas, a lot more of them are definitely somewhat feasible to have usage just because of the interactions they provide. But there we go, the revered cards, right? So, any standout cards for you, especially from the lower tier rarities? Again, I think because we're seeing some of these new cool mechanics, get a card to 6 block is definitely interesting, that there is definitely more value in, you know, something that's a little bit behind because it gives X value from other aspects, right? So, for instance, all the cheer cards, definitely factoring in the token generation from the hero in essence to their rate. So it can be quite interesting to think about the actual value of the card and where it should stand in relation to everything else that exists. But anyway, we'll leave it there. Let me know what you think. Hope you enjoyed. See ya.